right, here we are. It's November 2025, and it's the Darda Group podcast. So a big question I constantly get asked by sellers, I thought I'd kick off with this, is, who's buying right now, right? The market, has been a little soft this summer, and now they're all wondering who's buying. So tell us, who is buying right now?
I think we're getting a little bit of everybody, but, we're starting to get, as we get into November, that seasonal crowd starts to come into the market. They start to look. So I think we're already noticing that on our listings. So,
well, they're certainly online looking, that's for sure.
Yeah, if they're not physically looking at your home, they are on the internet. And locals, you get the full-time residents right now who are still moving around. They're going under contract on their home, so they're going out looking for the upgrade or the downsize. So I think, we're seeing a lot of everybody, but I think notably this season, or at least the early start of it, there's a group that we're not seeing, right?
Oh, yeah, international buyers. Yeah, that's been soft.
Yeah, so, that means the European buyers, they've been, pretty soft for a long time, right?
Yeah, ever since COVID.
Yeah, and then the Canadians really retreated last year, and we'll see if they come back to our market this year or not, but I don't think the exchange rates are in their favor.
Yeah, definitely not. And the political climate, they don't feel as welcome as they used to. And they got choices; they can go anywhere, right? So, but we just still see them buying. Also, too, we're noticing a migration that has really helped the real estate market this year, and that is that East Coast to West Coast migration. That is very strongly continuing on any given day on our inventory. We may have anywhere from 20 to 30 buyers looking at homes that we have up for sale. And we're noticing about 20 to 30% of the showings are actual East Coast based agents. They're coming from the East Coast over to our market to show houses in our market. So that's kind of been an interesting trend. Yeah. Because when we have buyers that, let's say, go to the East Coast, do you get in your car and drive and show houses in
No.
Fort Lauderdale? No.
I get lost.
So. Exactly, right? You don't know the market. And but why do these agents then drive 2.5 hours over here to try to show real estate? And what challenges does that start to present for us?
I think, a lot of times they don't want to give up the client. So rather than refer them off and take a small portion of the commission, they'll travel with the client and show them homes, and so they'll facilitate the sale. They are licensed throughout the state of Florida, so they can do that.
Perfectly legal, yeah,
perfectly legal. But I think a lot of times too, their relatives or their friends or their friends of the family. So there's a relationship there. So there might be a trust issue or kind of a family obligation to work with that client if they're selling a home in Miami or Fort Lauderdale, to then, travel with the buyer to help them find a home to buy here in Lake County or Collier County. It's happening all the time. I had a showing yesterday on a waterfront property in Fort Myers. It's right in the agent's brokerage name when they set up the showing that they're from Miami. So, and we're seeing it more and more frequently, but it does come with challenges. So if they're coming from the other coast, they may be late to the showing.
I had one this weekend. It was an hour and 15 minutes late to the showing appointment. Sellers driving around the neighborhood with their pets in their car wondering where this agent is at.
Yeah, a vacant house. Okay. It's frustrating, but no big deal. No harm, no foul. But if you're driving around the car or around the neighborhood with your pet in the car, that's frustrating. It's sometimes hard to get feedback. Just the nature of the East Coast to West Coast migration is sometimes they don't speak English. So we were just chatting off camera. We were trying to get feedback on a showing we had over the weekend from an agent from Miami and their customers. And the feedback, we got it, but it's in Spanish.
Right. Which, thank God we have people that speak Spanish on our team. So, it is. So they're just not also as familiar with our market. And they also, when they do bring a buyer contract, it also has a few interesting twists sometimes, right? For example, they might choose a title company, which maybe that sounds good to a seller if the buyer is going to pay title. Why might that not be the best decision?
Well, and here in our area, the buyer can elect to choose title. If they choose title, they pay for it. Otherwise, it's kind of the default is going to be the seller's going to pick the title company and pay for it. So if they choose title, it sounds advantageous to the seller because that's a little bit of a savings. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, but it's a little bit of a savings to the seller, so they go along with it. But then they're in control. You're chasing their lender, you're chasing their title company, you're chasing the buyer for updates, and if there's delays or anything like that, you're having to reach out to a title company that's not local to get the answers. So it is a little bit better, if you can, to pick title, even if the buyer offers it, so that you can keep the control, of your closing. Because that's a long period. That's 30, 45 days. This is not something that just goes away. So that's 30, 45 days where you're chasing somebody else for every ounce of information having to do with your closing.
Right, because local title companies want repeat business from realtors, so they're going to go out of their way with customer service. Where a title company that, this is a one-off for them, probably is not going to go out of their way on communication. So, so that's just something to be paying attention to. Mm-hmm. It may be better to pay for title, but still have more control in your transaction, or at least better communication. But now another type of buyer you mentioned was, our seasonal buyers are coming, and our sellers are getting excited about season coming. And the thing that everybody's been talking about is interest rates, but it kind of was an interesting month in that the Fed did reduce rates, but what happened to the rates?
They didn't really change.
They didn't change. In fact, they even jumped up the day they changed the rates. It went from like 6.17 up to 6.4, excuse me. So that was kind of an unexpected twist. And the reason they're saying is that happened is because the very moment they announced the rate drop for the Fed, in the same breath, they also announced that they don't expect that they'll make to do one in December. Yeah. And that kind of knee-jerk reaction from lenders was, protect ourselves. And they raised the rates. Okay. But if you look at them, they're still historically down, right? They're a year going into this year, they were like bouncing around between 7 and 8%. So they're down. And they're projected to still go down, but just slowly, nothing huge. Mm-hmm. And so I did some looking into this. And they've been surveying buyers to say, when are you going to jump in the market with interest rates? And what they found is some buyers said, if it gets below 6%, I'm going to maybe start shopping instead of just looking. But what they noticed is between 5 and 5.5%, fully 2/3 of buyers say that they're waiting for rates even below 5%. So that's where we think the needle's got to move, is when you start getting below 5.5% based on the buyer surveys.
Okay. So we still have some distance to travel from where we're at to those kind of rates.
Right. And with how slow they've been dropping, so that's another thing to look at going into the new year. There's not going to be unless something really weird happens, there's not going to be like this major shift that buyers are going to suddenly flood into the market because of interest rates. That's for sure. And the reason is affordability. If you look at, let's say your housing budget is $2,500 a month. Mm-hmm. Okay. And if you are at say six, let's call it you give me a rate, 6.1%. Yeah. Okay. You can afford a $410,000 house.
Okay.
Okay. If you're at a 7% rate, you can only afford a $380,000 house.
That's a big change.
Yeah, that $30,000 is going to open up a lot more choices, right, for that buyer. So that's how big of an impact this is.
Yeah, that might not be super dramatic in terms of that might be a little bit of a newer home, or even from resale to new construction. That could be an extra bedroom. That could be a little extra square footage. That might be an oversized lot instead of a standard lot, depending on the neighborhood. That could be, if your choices are this neighborhood, this gated neighborhood, or that gated neighborhood, that's a little bit more expensive. Now all of a sudden you can afford that other gated neighborhood you really wanted to be in. So, that $30,000, and that's in a less expensive category, really makes a big difference. If you're buying a more expensive home, you can see how that really changes things for the buyer.
So the question the sellers all want to know is, what's got to happen for this market to get my prices to go up again, right? And there's a bunch of factors there. Well, we just talked about rates. So we know now it's 5.5 or lower that's going to really move the needle there on affordability. Mm-hmm. Income growth is always another factor in the market heating up. And right now, Lee County income growth is hovering around 5%. Mm-hmm. You figure a 3% inflation rate, there's not a lot of that making it to the housing budget. So we're not counting on that one.
Yeah.
Supply and demand is always the big one, in my opinion, because we know if it's 3 months or less supply, prices go up.
Yeah.
If it's 3 months to 6 months, it's kind of a neutral market. Prices remain flat. But when you go over 6 months, supply, now there's more sellers than buyers, and prices have downward pressure. In fact, prices did drop year over year, something like around 4% year over year in Lee County because of this. So we don't see that changing too much right now because it's 6.6 months supply. But here's the good news. It was 8.5 months supply a year ago. So it's going the right direction.
Yeah. And we're feeling it. Mm-hmm. We're starting to see, from where we were at the beginning of the year, the inventory's gone down. That's been funneling the buyers into the homes that are on the market. Mm-hmm. I mean, anybody who's been watching your market update videos, and if you haven't, you should. I mean, they're a great tool for information on the housing market in our area. Or the podcast, we've been talking about the difference between a buyer's market, seller's market, and a neutral market, the supply and the demand that creates that. And I think kind of getting to your point, if we can continue on that trajectory, rates going down slowly, buyers entering the market and increasing in volume slowly, and the inventory continuing to trend down, once again, slowly, we are slowly recovering. But this is a recovery process. Our market's been soft for what? What would you say, about 3 years?
3 years. We're kind of back to almost 2021 prices right now.
Mm-hmm. So when sellers ask me, are we going to, was it a month, 3 months? Do you think by the end of the season, the market's going to be shooting back up again? Look, we've gone down for 3 years. Isn't it fair to assume it could take 3 years to correct the mess, get back to where we were? So, we're looking at a longer term plan here.
So for sellers, we're telling them, make your plans to either sell now, but if you're not, like let's say they're going to rent it instead of sell it, that it should be a multi-year process, right? They're not going to suddenly see higher prices this season, for example. Mm-hmm. As much as we might like to see that, there's no data that's supporting that out there, which causes actually another factor. Since the market favors buyers, we actually are noticing record fallout rates, meaning when you go under contract, buyers backing out of deals. We just saw a stat this week that said it's in Florida, it's running between 17% to 21%, depending on where you're at in Florida. It's different, but some markets are different than others. But overall, it's the highest it's been pretty much since they've been tracking it since 2017. So
I haven't been tracking it very long, but consider all that has gone on since they have been tracking it since 2017. We've had COVID. We had a pandemic worldwide. We've had multiple wars start up and end. We've had, the political climate's changed. So you've got a lot of things that have happened since they've been recording that data. And even through pandemics, wars, everything, it's the lowest now than it's ever been since they've been recording it. So,
well, it's the highest. The highest,
yes. So, with that, looking at it from that perspective, what are some things you can do as a seller to mitigate your property from going under contract and then falling out of contract and having to find a new buyer?
Well, probably the first thing to do is look at why they fall apart. So the number one reason is they back out in the inspection. Mm-hmm. And because that's their right now, if you have an as-is contract, which might sound good to a seller, hey, it's as-is, but the downside to an as-is is the buyer can walk for literally any reason they want during that inspection period, which often could be as long as 2 weeks. So the fallout is a major issue. Advice for sellers there is maybe get their home pre-inspected to minimize surprises. Also, if you do have an inspection issue, our advice is really try to negotiate that. As long as it's within reason, try to negotiate. Because if you don't, guess what's going to come up when you resell it to a different buyer? The same issue, right? Or and worse, you're going to have to disclose it to every buyer legally so that they know that this is an issue if you don't fix it. So, you're going to deal with it sooner or later. You might as well deal with it while you got a buyer on the line.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I like that point you mentioned earlier. So the contract default for Florida on a NASA's contract is 15 days if you don't fill in any number. So, best advice would be try and trim that back.
Like 10 days or less, 7 days.
7, 10, maybe 12. But 15 is a long time. That first week or two of the contract belongs to the buyer, not the seller. That's their time to do their due diligence. And the contract reads at buyer's sole discretion, they can back out of the deal. So you don't want to limit that time.
Right. And what's happening during that time? They're still shopping. They're still looking at houses. They're going to open houses. Houses they looked at, they liked that were sold, come back on the market for the same problem. And so, our house that they liked, all of a sudden got a big price reduction. Boom, your buyer is gone. The second biggest reason is financing fallout. I mean, that's an easy one. Just make sure you get that pre-qualification letter. We did have one, unfortunately, fall out last week because the buyer was on furlough because of the government shutdown. There's not much you can do about that. But yeah, do your due diligence. If talked to a buy owner last week, so excited they sold their house cash. Talked to them a little more, found out they didn't even get proof of funds letter. So yeah, make sure you have the proof of funds if they're paying cash. Third most common reason that people back out of contracts is the shocking high insurance in some cases, especially if it's in a flood zone. That could cause them to get some cold feet, the sticker shock of it.
I don't know if it's even cold feet, but if you're financing, that can really throw your monthly payments out of whack. And it could cause the lender to say, you did afford this home, but now that you have to pay X, Y, and Z for flood and homeowners, we don't think you can afford this home any longer. You can't make those monthly payments. So, it's just something as a seller, I think one of the ways you can solve that issue is if you have homeowners and flood insurance, post it, tell your real estate agent, I want it posted on my listing. There is a comment section that only realtors get to read. You can put it there. You could put your declarations page or, anything showing all the financials of your insurance as an attachment to the MLS so that the buyer knows, the lender knows ahead of time, even at the time of the showing, what they would be paying if they bought your home. And then also find out, if you are in a flood zone and you have flood insurance, is it assumable? Can it be transferred to the buyer? That's another big savings that you can offer a buyer. Not only does it help reduce your chances of fallout, it might increase your saleability too.
Well, and fifth on the list was occasionally there's low appraisals. We still see a few of those out there. It's surprising to me, being that we're in a declining market. We're used to seeing those in an appreciating market, but sometimes the appraisals just are not spot on, and there's nothing you can do about it these days. You can't go and argue with the appraiser or present different comps. There's really no negotiating on those things by design, by law. So there's not much you can do to influence it these days. But the solution to all this is really pretty easy, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it's in the agent you choose. These are things that you don't just kind of wake up knowing. You can't Google this. I mean, I guess you can, but you're typically not Googling your way out of this one or using, chat to figure out the answer to this problem. This is something that you build with experience. A lot of times it's an agent who is battle tested. They've had bad appraisals. They've had rough inspections. They've had to negotiate through insurance issues. Those agents have the experience to help a seller through a market like this and through some of those challenges.
In a couple ways, right? They can negotiate. They know how to, they see the red flags up front.
Yeah.
So they can make a more solid deal going into the pending process. And then when things do pop up, like a home inspection issue or an appraisal issue, they're experienced on how to negotiate solutions that everybody can buy into and keep that deal together.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So I think what you're getting at there is an experienced agent isn't being reactive. They're being proactive. They can see these things from a mile away. A lot of times they're figuring out the answers to these fallout questions when they're marketing the listing actively before there's ever even a buyer. Pre-inspections, proof of funds, or a pre-approval letter from a lender to make sure the buyer's qualified, getting the insurance stuff and posting it out there. I mean, all of these things can be done before there's even a buyer. So
Yeah. Just like if you're sailing across the ocean in rough weather, you want an experienced captain, not a beginner, right?
Yeah. So, what would be a question or two you can ask if you're interviewing agents for the job of selling your house that would help kind of, I don't know, fish out if they're experienced enough to help with this?
Well, it's real simple. We're in a buyer's market. When go back, how many years ago was the last buyer's market?
Before COVID?
Right. We had the 2008, 2010.
Oh, that's going way back.
Yeah, that's going way back. And then it was almost like several years of straight going up every year. So if you've had you want to have an agent that probably has, I'm going to say maybe 20 years experience, 15 years experience, that somebody that's going to actually...
I'm out. I've only got 18.
Well, I mean, you're going to want somebody... Well, there's another reason for that, right? Yeah. So if they don't have those many years, how many deals do they do? What kind of volume are they doing? The more they negotiate, the more experience they have. Or is there somebody on their team, like a transaction coordinator, that has 20 years experience? That's another workaround. Just know that somebody in the deal has the experience up under their belt.
Yeah. I'd say you're even safe with like maybe 8 or 10 years. I mean, basically anybody who has been in the market a couple years pre-COVID, because there was that time period where everything sold itself and buyers weren't backing out of contracts because there was 5 other buyers in line to buy that house. So it really wasn't the skill set to market. There really wasn't the skill set to negotiate. We were order takers back then. We were bidding. And there really wasn't the skill set to save deals because deals weren't falling apart. Buyers were afraid of losing houses, not walking away from them.
Right.
So if you find an agent who got into the business and had worked a couple of years before that market, they've probably experienced enough to know what it was like before homes sold themselves. But if you're hiring an agent who's just jumped into the market during COVID and they happen to still be in the business, they probably are still struggling with what's going on right now, and they're going to have a harder time helping a seller through some of these rough patches if the home gets into that kind of situation.
Yeah, and that's easy stuff to figure out. You can just probably look on any number of websites and Google the agent and find out how long they've been.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all those Realtor.com, Redfin, Zillow, Trulia, the agent's website, will probably show how many years they've been in the business. So.
Yeah, very good stuff. Well, all great information. Thanks for participating today. And I'm certainly excited about season coming.
Me too. I think a lot of our clients are too.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. This is the Darda Group Real Estate Podcast, and we're excited for season. We'll see you next month.